Hello and welcome to another edition of Straight from the Training Ground, the podcast where we share our love for the beautiful game and the people out in their communities doing beautiful things. I'm Jay here. We have a special guest with us. We're very excited this week. One, Mr. Callum Morris. He has played at the collegiate level. He's coached at the collegiate level, and now he's currently coaching in the youth system within the United States, some club teams and the like. And he also scouts for the Columbus Crew. Cal, happy to have you join us.
Hey, mate. How are you doing?
Doing great, my man. Doing great. So, first of all, there's a lot of things I'd like to get into. You kind of have a unique role, and I think that's what people will find interesting if they ever watch this.
Damn!
But anyways, first tell everybody a little bit about your background in soccer, and how did you end up here in the United States?
So I moved over in 2005, got scouted playing for a Middlesbrough academy, college academy, by Scott Morrissey, who is still the head coach at the University of Rio Grande, obviously, who you know very well, and that's obviously how we obviously cross paths. So yeah, came over as a 17-year-old back in 2005, and we've never left the state.
Awesome. And then after you graduated, how did you get into coaching?
Honestly, I wanted to stay in the US. It wasn't necessarily something I thought of going into. Obviously, I had a couple of friends that went into the USL and tried to look down that path. Unfortunately, wasn't good enough. And again, it's all about opinions, right? So ended up doing my graduate assistant on the women's soccer side at the University of Rio Grande. And then 2 years after doing that, the head coach stepped down, and thankfully the AD at the time, who's still the AD at Rio, offered me the opportunity to take over the position full time. The program at Rio was only in its infancy as a college program. It had been a club sport prior to. So we were able to work with getting my H-1B visa, and I was able to recruit for the school as well. So it was a dual position as an admissions recruiter and a soccer coach for the program. So that's how I started coaching, really. And at the time, I was very young. Like I said, I moved out when I was 17, so I got that position around 23. And looking back, I was probably way too young to take a head coaching role. Never really coached properly. Done a couple of youth things with you when you were coaching, obviously, at Circleville. But yeah, looking back now, I was very naive in the way that I coached. And, as time's gone on, 20 years later, I would do things very differently looking back.
Throw you straight into the fire, though. That's how you learn.
Absolutely.
So how did you go from there to getting involved with the Columbus Crew?
So in 2015, I met my wife. Obviously, didn't know that was going to be my wife at the time, but she was working in Columbus, and I made the decision to move to Columbus. So for the last 6 months at Rio, I was doing that commute back and forth, which was a little under a 2-hour drive, and honestly, it just got too much. So ended up stepping down from my role at Rio, got to Columbus, and then started working at the Columbus Crew, which was back then in the old ownership group. The Crew had their own youth development system, both on the male and female side. And obviously with my background being in the women's game, started coaching a U14 team, freshman high school group, and then started working at Ohio Dominican under Amy Haywood, who's now at Appalachian State, and was with her for 2.5 years as a volunteer assistant. Honestly, I thought it would have been a lot easier to get into the college game in Columbus, just with the amount of colleges that are here, but found it really difficult, even with my playing background, and thought we did relatively well at Rio in regards to the coaching side, but found it very difficult to get in. So had to start from scratch again, doing the volunteering stuff and then coaching club on the side. And that's how I eventually then met Pat Onstad, who at the time, obviously the ownership had left Columbus and moved to Austin, and then the new ownership came in. Pat had taken over the role as general manager. And I got to know him through coaching his son. And then COVID happened. And we stayed in touch. At that time, we found out we were having our second child. So we moved closer to my wife's family up near Toledo, and I was completely out of soccer. Amy had stepped away from ODU to take a position in North Carolina. So I was completely out of soccer and honestly going stir crazy. My wife was like, "You need to get out and find a hobby." So I just reached out to Pat and was like, "Hey, like I said, I built a relationship with him for, a good 2 years, and we stayed in touch and asked if there was anything part-time going on at the Crew. And he spoke to the academy director, kind of gave my background, came for an interview as they were looking for scouting in the Michigan area, which obviously doesn't have an MLS team and has a lot of talent, and they wanted to try and hit that area a lot more than had been done in the past. So I met the academy recruitment manager at the time and the academy director. Like I said, had an interview and it went from there.
So you started out initially in that Michigan kind of region. That was kind of your territory. Is that what the goal was for the Crew?
Yeah, so when I first started, obviously, was to learn more about the teams in the academy, the level, which obviously is a big part. So then when I'm looking at different age groups, obviously, that level at that age group and what they're looking for, the needs. Obviously, they were going through a huge transition from an ownership standpoint, so still trying to build an identity for what the academy wanted to look like. And that's continually evolving and developing. Even now, I started that back in 2021 when we were able to obviously interact with people again. So going up to Michigan, it was every age group right the way through, from U15 to U18. But then obviously once I get to work with the staff here at the club more and they got to learn more about me, then we need you to go to Cincinnati. We need you to go to, obviously that was before FCC came on board. We need you to head down to Florida to the national event. So it kind of, it went pretty quick in regards to the scope of where the scouting led to. So it started in Michigan, but then, we obviously the ownership was from Cleveland. So we wanted to try and obviously build more of a relationship in Cleveland. So we were out there a lot and continue to be out there. It took me in a lot of different avenues, which has helped me grow from not just obviously from a coaching standpoint, because, I was doing bits and bobs with the coaching stuff, but even just how players are evolving and how the game's changing from when I was playing to then coaching at the college level and how we recruited there to then at the academy level.
Yeah, of course. If you're just joining us, we're here with Callum Morris, scout for the Columbus Crew and coaching within the youth system. Make sure you like and subscribe down below. We appreciate all your help. Callum, that kind of leads me to my next question. What are some challenges that you face in scouting the youth system within the United States?
Challenges, obviously, the sheer vastness of the US at times can be an issue, especially when there's events going on in multiple locations at the same time. Obviously, even though we're a pro club, we still have, we don't have endless amounts of resources that we can send 10, 15 people all over the US. So it has to be very strategic. And again, it goes back to the needs of the age groups that we have. There's a lot of social media intake now in regards to players. And, I was talking to this to another scout a couple of days ago, how, we've got 13, 14-year-olds with YouTube channels and TikToks that have, 6-figure followers. And you always see the best bits, right? You never see the bad bits. So
no one has a low light channel.
No, exactly.
Except for me.
But at times you see more from the low lights than you do the best bits.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously from a scouting standpoint, when you're trying to get that crystal ball out and you're looking at a 14, 15-year-old trying to predict, the next 3 or 4 years of their soccer career, you're always going to make mistakes. You hope that you try and eliminate those mistakes through data, through watching them multiple times, through other people watching them to see if you come up with the same thought process.
Sure.
But again, it goes back to obviously the club and what their philosophy is in developing players and the needs for those teams that obviously we're looking for.
And Callum, one of the things I was looking forward to asking you about, because you have experience as a college coach as well as scouting right now with the crew. What's your take on, or can you explain to people, your own opinion on scouting, watching someone on video, like you just said, kind of online or on film, compared to in person?
Personally, I love the in person. I think it creates more context. I think video is very useful. Like I said, the US is so vast and there's so many games being played every weekend at so many different levels. Video gives you the opportunity to see multiple from your own bedroom, from your own living room, from your office. But going in person, you get to see parent interaction with their child. Is the parent, over dominating the conversation? Do you hear them from the sideline? How's the player in the huddle? If they've been subbed off, what's the reaction like on the bench?
Body language.
Body language, yeah, it's massive. And at video, you don't always see that.
Okay.
So from our standpoint, when we go out and scout, we do see plenty of video. And then if a player really stands out, okay, we need to go and see this kid in person. We'll be contacting, the club coaches, people that are really close to the player to kind of find out the human first rather than the player. Because we need to make sure that we have good people coming into the environment that are going to create a positive, to help with the positive culture that hopefully we're trying to set within each age group. Then obviously the technical aspect of the player then obviously comes into focus as well. But we're talking about humans here. We're talking about young humans that, especially depending on what age group we're scouting at. Some of them haven't started puberty yet. So when I talk about that crystal ball and figuring out, how does the next 3 years look for that player? They might go through a growth spurt. Are they an early developer? Are they a late developer? Are they currently play 9v9 and then going to 11v11 field? It's a completely different stratosphere. A kid might look really good on the 9v9 field because it's smaller, go to 11v11 and be non-existent. So, there's a lot of different things that we have to take into context. That's why it's so thorough scouting. When I first got into it, I was like, brilliant. I'm watching players, and it was something that I've always wanted to get involved in. But then as you actually get into the weeds, and you've watched 10, 15 games over a weekend, those games and players just start to come together, and you're trying to, so time management is so important in regards to scouting. You might have 2 or 3 games going on at the same time. So do you have notes on players that you're looking for, or are you just going to a field to see what's there? And then obviously, as you're going through that, how are you recording the players that you're watching? How are you note taking? Making sure that obviously you're getting the best information to then bring back, to the head academy scout and then to the recruitment manager to, okay, I think we need to investigate more in this player, or, I don't see anything in this player and we need to move on. But again, it's scouting. Yeah, we're working with 15-year-olds. That kid hasn't hit growth spurt. We watched him once, twice, 3 times, not there. Then next year they go through that, and that extra 5 yards is now there. They've built muscle mass. They are 5 inches taller. So we can't necessarily ever close off a player. But at the same time, we have to obviously be very careful on who we're bringing in. Because again, we want to try and build a culture here that's positive and about development.
So that leads me to my next thing. You and I have talked a little bit off camera about this, but what's your advice? Because you've been in the youth landscape of soccer here in the United States for 15, 20 years now in various levels. So what are your advice now to youth players out there right now?
Honestly, when we are out looking, especially at the younger age groups, I don't know if you've seen the famous video with Arsene Wenger when he's talking about, you build the foundation of a house with the basement, right? And the basement is that technical ability for you to be able to do the basics and do it well. We don't see enough kids now outside just kicking the ball around, playing pickup. And and we see that in their technical ability. We can see if a kid's drilled the ball against a wall for hours and hours compared to a kid that hasn't. You know, and I understand in the US there's so many other sports to play. I understand that there's so many different times of the year that sports overlap with each other. You might go from soccer to basketball to baseball. You know, and I also know that, you know, soccer is a continued growth in the US. It's not at the level that it is in other countries. You know, so when we're looking, especially at the younger kids, is how much time are they spending on the ball?
Yeah.
You know, is it 10 minutes a night? Is it only at practice twice a week?
I was going to say, you mean by on their own, correct?
On their own, yeah. You know, where they're not being, you know, where it's got structure. You know, we don't see a lot of kids playing with unstructure, which means, you know, street ball. You see, and this is the thing in other sports like basketball or baseball, you'll see that. You'll see kids that are, you know, you're driving down the road and there's a hoop there and kids are just playing pickup, right? Or you'll see kids in the backyard or in the front yard throwing a baseball at each other. You don't really see a lot of kids out there doing that with a soccer ball. And it's not to say you won't see any, but there isn't enough of it happening, especially considering soccer is the most played sport in the US until I believe the age of 12, 11 in the US, and then it falls off. You know, and a lot of academies now in the MLS are starting younger and younger to try and find those players that are doing that at 10 or 11, and then hopefully trying to grow that love for the game that keeps them doing what they're doing to hopefully progress through the different systems, whether that is an academy or a club level, or, you know, my ambition is to play at college. You know, there's so many different facets, but at the same time, you're hoping that they're doing it because they want to do it. They haven't been pushed because, you know, a parent wants them to do it, or, you know, for them to have passion in something, you want to have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's important that passion comes through, especially at the younger ages, because it should be fun, right?
Yeah.
We talked about this when I was coaching with the pre-formation groups here at the Crew. You know, even though they're in an academy setting, we want it to be fun. You know, because they're 10 or 11 years old. Like, we don't want to take that away from them, because we know as they go through the academy system, that fun goes out the way, because now it's getting closer to, can I make a career out of this? Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of different things that we focus on when we're talking and looking at players, of how they can develop in the US and what more they can be doing to improve themselves. And it starts at a young age. You know, if they're trying to do that at 14, 15 years old, they've already missed 5 vital years of physical development, but also that ability to get those hours in.
Callum Morris, scout with the Columbus Crew, and we'll get you out of here on a positive note now, Callum. What do you enjoy most about your job?
It's long. Don't get me wrong. There's long hours.
No, this is positive.
Positive. But the long hours, the positives are all those long hours put in to then you find a kid and they come in and they excel. You know, it then shows those long hours that you put in have paid off. You know, Chase Adams, you know, one of the players in Crew 2's group right now, he's just turned 16. You might have heard of him. He scored 10 goals a couple of weeks ago for the US national team. You know, we found him playing ODP, you know, on a field in Indiana.
Yeah.
He's come into the group and, you know, he's thriving and doing very well on all levels. You know, so when we see players like that, Austin Sue, who's now broke into Crew 2 this season, you know, seeing those kids come in as, you know, U15, U16 players, you know, and been here for a couple of years now, and see them develop and move through into those higher level teams, that's the achievement. And I know that it's a long-term thing. Scouting definitely isn't an overnight success job. You know, you might bring a player in and you think they're going to be great, and then 6 months later they're rotated back out. It just didn't work for multiple reasons. So those positives are definitely seeing those kids that come in and, you know, 3-4 years down the line, they're still there and making, you know, huge strides in their development, and, you know, pushing for hopefully a professional contract. Because that's the other thing, Jay, you know, we work in an industry where that 1% is making it through.
Yeah.
You know, that 1% of millions of kids, and the 1% of millions, I know it sounds large, but it's really not. You know, you're always looking for that diamond in the rough. You're always looking for that needle in the haystack. You know, when you've got 30 other MLS clubs trying to find that next superstar, you know, there's only so many of them that go around. So we have to be creative, and I think that's an enjoyment side of it as well. Can we find those players? You know, can we investigate and find the best kids to come in and be a Columbus Crew player? So those are some of the things that I really like about it. If you spoke to my wife, she'd probably say something different.
She said you needed a hobby. Come on.
I needed a hobby, yeah. But those hobbies at times take over. But no, she's brilliant. But yeah, those are some of the big things that I really enjoy. And honestly, interacting with other scouts and how other teams play. You know, the Columbus Crew have a system. You know, as you see our first team play, our academies play a similar way. And then you see other teams that might play a bit more direct, and they recruit different types of players.
Yeah.
You know, so again, it's helping me from my development and my growth, seeing how, you know, from a different lens, this is what we're looking for compared to what we are. And I think that's obviously, as I've gone from a college coach, you know, back in 2011, you know, then into club soccer in 2015, then even working with ODP, you know, there's so many different levels, working with, you know, the youth kids that I did with you back in, you know, 2005 and 6 and 7, and, you know, just seeing kids run around and, you know, pee-wee football to now, you know, watching the first team at Columbus, you know, knock a ball around before training starts. You know, it's kind of touched on all of those, and, you know, it brings me just back to why we love this game, right? It's something that I love doing, and something hopefully I can continue to do for a long time.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. We all know that. So again, Callum Morris, thanks for joining us so much, man. We appreciate you taking the time. Youth coach and scout within the Columbus Crew system. We love everything you're doing there, as well as the crew and their organization. So thanks a lot.
Oh, by the way, the music for the intro just brought me back to my college playing days, mate.
That's what it's all about. There you go.
Cheers, brother.